So we're starting our next panel, and this is on legal entity identifiers. For those of you who are not familiar with the FDTA, one of the requirements in the FDTA is to use standard identifiers. And this is an issue not only for the municipal securities market, but for pretty much every market for any security that's issued. How do you identify the legal entity that actually issued a security? How do you know who the obligor is for a bond that's issued? And this is an area where there's a number of efforts have been done in recent years to try and standardize legal entity identifiers across the world, in fact. And we are very lucky to have 3 experts on this subject. So I'll just introduce our speakers. First we have Scott Preiss, who is from CUSIP, or who works for a global head of, he's the Senior Vice President for Global Head of CUSIP from FactSet Research Systems. We have Richard Robinson, who's the Chief Strategist and Open Data and Standards and heads Open Data and Standards for Bloomberg. And we have Peter Worms, who is the Business Development Manager for the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. Some of you may be more familiar with the term GLEIF is what it's called. So with no further ado, I'll kick it over to our speakers, and I think we're going to kick off initially with Scott. So take away, Scott. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Campbell. Are these working? Can you hear me in the back? Okay. I see that I'm up first, which I'm fine with. I have 6 children. I'm used to never getting the last word. So I want to start by thanking Michelle and Campbell and XBRL US for the opportunity to speak today. Good morning / afternoon to everyone. I'm Scott Preiss. I'm Global Head of CUSIP Global Services, which is proudly operated for the American Bankers Association by FactSet. I noticed on the roster of attendees today a mix of disciplines, so I'll use my agreed 3 slides to commingle some key fundamental identifier issues with some of the latest trends and developments. So, I see in today's program, this section is referred to as entity and security identifiers, and refers to the use of many different entity and security identifiers. And certainly there are a plethora of identifiers out there. I'm not sure I agree with the word use. For instance, every information provider, every data vendor has their own symbology, but its use beyond navigating internal systems, for instance, in the public markets for functions like clearance, settlement, and trading, in my view, is limited. So ironically, it was indeed the challenge of multiple incompatible identification schemas that gave rise to the creation of a single interoperable and machine-readable instrument identifier, which has come to be known as the CUSIP. CUSIP is an ANSI-accredited standard since 1976 and fits into the ISO 12-character ISIN symbology for cross-border communication, and the ISIN standard first was certified by ISO in 1981. I think it's important to note that the use and adoption of CUSIP really did predate any mention of CUSIP in any specific regulations, not the other way around. It really was the system itself that was embraced, adopted, and implemented by virtually every North American financial institution, and then later on written peripherally into some rules and regulations. Moreover, this system, the CUSIP system, is predicated on a unique issuer 6-character code and a fungible instrument identifier, and that really is critical. That is, the notion of fungibility, guaranteeing uniqueness of an underlying financial instrument, is an aspect that market participants worldwide depend on. And it is the same method that is employed by other national numbering agencies, up to 120 different numbering agencies that collectively comprise ANA, or the Association of National Numbering Agencies. If you get no other message from this presentation, I'd like to shout loudly, CUSIP Global Services, or CGS, is very supportive of the FDTA. And we certainly couldn't agree more with the first bullet on the screen, that standardized machine-readable reporting is the key to transparency and universal accessibility. And especially given the fact that incompatible ID schemas indeed gave birth to the CUSIP system. Moreover, we note that the FDTA specifically requires the adoption of a common legal entity identifier for regulated organizations, and we strongly agree that that should be the LEI, or legal entity identification. The LEI, in fact, is near and dear to CUSIP's heart. We were active participants in standards development on various ISO working groups, even the drafting committee, and we have continued to promote the use and adoption of the LEI, first in conjunction with DTCC as a registered local operating unit, and now with WM.N in the same function. And we are very proud of mapping LEIs to US-based ISINs and making those freely available on the GLEIF.org website. And just one comment about what the FDTA is and what it is not, and I've heard some chatter about this already, both during the break and in public conversations. As a previous speaker noted this morning, I believe Mr. Pointer, the FDTA, are you able to still hear me in the back?
Grab that.
Okay. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. The FDTA certainly has ambitious goals, and we're very supportive. But in terms of symbology, I'd like to distinguish what it is and what it is not. And the statute absolutely refers to the need for a legal entity identifier or something like an LEI, but does not specifically mention instrument level identifiers. So I'm hoping during the panel discussion to have a broader discussion about why that should be and what the aspirations are long-term for the FDTA. And then in respect of time, I'll just close my portion of show and tell with a glance at some of the current and future activities in identification standards at CUSIP. Of course, CUSIP is always looking forward. We're at the forefront of standards development that are impactful on a global basis. In the past, that's been ISIN, LEI, and also CFI codes for identifying core attributes of a security in cross-border communications, a financial instrument short name, and coming soon, a product identifier that will complement ISINs in the OTC derivative space. Finally, at the request of market participants and at the direction of our industry board of trustees, we're always pursuing solutions for emerging asset classes and associated strategic partners. And in the past, recently, that's been for listed US and Canadian options, digitized securities, physical precious metals, but currently with a specific focus on the private markets and also voluntary carbon credits. So I look forward to the panel discussion with my colleagues, including exploring what the terms free and open really mean in the context of instrument identifiers and associated data. Thanks very much.
Richard.
Yeah, thanks. Does the clicker work? Okay, so, oh yeah, that's still working. Besides, I talk kind of loud, so I'm sure people can hear me without the microphone anyway. So in my role as strategy around open data and standards, I represent Bloomberg on a number of international working groups. I'm chair of a number of organizations and working groups, such as I'm second co-vice convener for the Registration Management Group for 20022, which is ISO standard, as well as upcoming chair for IZITSI, which is a market practice organization for the US. As part of all that work, Bloomberg has been involved in LEI since inception. And a couple things here. I'm not going to take Pete's thunder away here. Just about Bloomberg, we are the largest issuer of LEIs globally. Out of the 37 local operating units that exist, that recently was just because DTCC had elected to exit, wasn't with their strategy anymore. So we actually doubled our numbers. So we have over 400,000 LEIs under management today. We can issue in over 220 jurisdictions, and we're accredited to issue LEIs for mutual funds in all those jurisdictions as well. So that's a separate accreditation. Another thing is that over 200 regulations globally either require the use of LEI or suggest the use of LEI. That's majority in the European theater, coming off of the MiFID. What was that, 2018, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And we were just reaccredited this year to issue LEIs for our 6th year. So reaccreditation is important because every LOU has to go through a very diligent check work and audit in order to affirm that they continue to have the technology, staff, support, and support of the company to continue to support the LEI and GLEIF Foundation overall. FIGI. So FIGI generally, it's the Financial Instrument Global Identifier. It's a standard for uniquely identifying financial instruments. It is based on open data. Within the standard itself, there's a clause that quotes the MIT open source standard. So that's the open source license. And that's in the standard itself, so there's nothing anybody can do except join one of those industry standard groups and try and remove it, and I'd like to see you try and do that. That probably would not happen. Some of the qualities about FIGI, it does not change. So FIGI is a permanent identifier. That allows you to have clear data lineage, tracking across your multiple sources that you have across the industry. As Scott mentioned, there's a lot of different identifiers out there, and they change through various corporate actions. The FIGI will always do the same, which lets you link through the metadata and the way that the data model is structured to bring all those together and rationalize it. The FIGI is not just the identifier as well. It's actually it includes the metadata. So if you go through the standard, it has a number of different things, ticker, exchange, and identifying information that comes along with the standard. So the standard and the open source license applies to the actual identifier as well as the associated metadata. We've issued over 1.2 billion FIGIs as of June 2022 across all asset classes, and that includes digital assets. So there's another certified provider, ACO, which is a digital aggregator out of France that issues cryptocurrency FIGIs. OpenFIGI.com is actually handling 12 billion API jobs per month. So in the last month, 12 billion API calls were hit against our databases, and we return that, and that's all free of charge. And actually, for City of Columbus, right before, while you guys were talking, I went, and anybody can do this. If you open up your phone and you went to openfigi.com in the search bar, and you typed in City of Columbus and hit return, you will get returns. I got back about 5,600, which I assume are all municipal securities for the City of Columbus. I'm not sure if that, I think that's active and inactive. So something that's available freely, you can grab it right now, has all the metadata associated with it, as well as the identifier. As I said, freely accessible both through that search, as well as there's a JSON API that you can use. And it's used globally by all firm types, including vendors. So our competitors come in and hit us really hard every month too, which contributes to that high number of API calls. But it is used globally according to the usage stats that we do get from FIGI, openfigi.com. So notable developments, and that's a little small over there. So I actually did bring up the presentation here so I could read it, and I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm getting old. See, you're all blurry now, but this is very clear. All right. So, starting out, I'm going to go backwards. So in 2022, we were gained accreditation through ANSI X9. ANSI X9 is the American National Standards Institute. X9 is the financial services division of that institute. And FIGI became an accredited national standard. Right alongside CUSIP, CUSIP is also a accredited national standard, X9 American standard within X9 as well. We added certified provider Keiko for cryptocurrencies, which I mentioned back in 2021, and they have issued over 7,000, I think it's over 8,000 now, cryptocurrency identifiers, which correspond to like your Bitcoins and Ethereums as well as some of your more esoteric stuff. We are accredited by the Brazilian National Standard Institute as well. They had looked at us when we had some discussions around standards, and ABNT accredited FIGI as a national standard of Brazil in 2020. And this is all based on a foundation that in 2015, Bloomberg, after creating the standard, went to the Object Management Group for accreditation and to actually encode all of this and give it out as a public good. OMG is an international technology standards consortium, 27 countries, as I say, 260 plus members, but they do standards, very technical standards mostly, with the US government, telecoms, satellites, military, everything that's in your phone runs off of Corba, which is a OMG standard. So OMG is one of those standards organizations that a lot of people don't hear about, but has a high impact within the community. Finally, some of the last things, especially related to the FDTA, the language we believe within FDTA does speak to open data and using open data standards, and FIGI fits that description very well. Some of the recognition of FIGI has been through mention in consultations globally, not just within the SEC and CFTC, but Australia, Monetary Authority of Singapore, the FSB. Recently, we were added to the rules on short selling and reporting on securities lending just in October 2023. So FIGI can be used in those reports alongside CUSIP and other identifiers. Also, just came off back of SEC 13F reporting, which at the beginning of January 2023, FIGI was allowed to be used as an optional data element. So you didn't have to report it. And one of the notable things is the first quarter, over 10% of reporters included FIGI freely. They didn't have to do it, but they actually inserted it in the report. We've also been added to form MPF as well as Monetary Authority of Singapore's fund reporting back in 2020. Scott mentioned U.S. options and Canadian options. Just to note on that, we do have over 367 million active of 500 million U.S. options that are identified with a FIGI. In Canada, over 2 million FIGIs have been issued that are active out of 3 million. Also, because of the local government aspect, we have over 5.3 million munis that are active out of 6.8 million munis that we have signed FIGIs to. So, and that brings me to end of my comments.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'll ask Peter, do you want to come up, or are you going to do it from there?
I can do either. Sure.
Okay, yep, whatever you feel.
Yeah. Page forward. I'll get right into it. How do you page forward?
Want to use it?
Yep, thank you. There we go. All right, so I'm going to be conscious of time here. We've got 30 minutes for this panel, and we're more than halfway through that. If you had asked me about this ahead of time, knowing these two are speaking in front of me, I would have bet on them taking more than 20 minutes. We got to 15 minutes. So
I speak fast.
the background here is the three of us have been on a variety of different panels for the better part of more than a decade, right? Talking about much of the content we talked about today. So Peter Worms, Business Development Manager at GLEIF, the Global LEI Foundation. I've been with GLEIF for 3 years. Prior to that, I was with Bloomberg for 27 years. In fact, I was one of the creators of the Financial Instrument Global Identifier. At GLEIF, my role as a Business Development Manager is to advance the LEI in regulation, but also in the private sector. and working with financial institutions that are incredibly familiar with the LEI, that receive the LEI from different data vendors like Bloomberg, but also require it in things like KYC and know your customer or client onboarding. We've used a lot of acronyms today, so I apologize. And as part of that, right, there's different rules and regulations, more than 230 rules and regulations and recommendations, I should say, around the globe, what financial institutions have to abide by when reporting to different regulators. So the GLEIF itself is a non-for-profit Swiss foundation founded by the Financial Stability Board. It was founded in the wake of the financial crisis, right? So back in 2008, trying to understand Lehman and the other atrocities that happened back in 2008 that took years to unwind. Tying it back to a name is really what it resolved to. Trying to figure out who ultimately was on the hook, which version of Lehman Brothers, right? It was clear that they needed some type of identifier to identify those that are involved in financial transactions, whether they're issuers, whether they're obligors, whether they're counterparties, so on and so forth. The LEI takes care of all of that. And GLEIF is overseen by the Regulatory Oversight Committee, which is comprised of 71 regulators, 19 observers from 50 different countries, and the GLEIF board has 15 independent directors. As Rich and both Scott alluded to, there are 37 partners for issuing LEIs or local operating units, and that number continues to grow. Rich touched on it. It is a rigorous process to become an LEI or an LEI issuer. It's not as simple as raising your hand and saying, I want to issue LEIs tomorrow. So for Bloomberg, that took the better part of 6 months to a year to get through the accreditation process, and they go through the reaccreditation process
every year
on an annual basis. So part of that is demonstrating that you've got the capabilities to validate and verify information in one or multiple jurisdictions. Bloomberg just so happens to be accredited in more than 220 jurisdictions globally. So these partner organizations are the issuers of the LEI, right? That's the important distinction here. GLEIF is not the issuer of the LEI. GLEIF maintains for public good the inventory of LEIs on its website. And to date, we're about to surpass 2.5 million LEIs. I'm just going to fast forward through some of this because I know we want to get through some of the questions. We touched on this real quickly, but in my mind, these are the key tenets. These are the foundational principles for identification, right? Open, unique, persistent, non-repeating, consistent, and standardized, right? And the LEI is every one of those things. We all know about the FTTA, so I'm going to skip that first paragraph. Somebody mentioned it earlier. Legal entity identifiers is mentioned in the bill, but it is lowercase. GLEIF stands in support of the FTTA, but wants to see legal entity identifiers become uppercase, right? In its simplest way. As somebody alluded to earlier too, it's some of the criteria that's specifically mentioned in the bill is be fully searchable, machine readable, non-proprietary, under an open license, and developed by a voluntary consensus standards body. And the LEI meets all of that criteria. Thank you. Do you need this? No.
All right, we've got 5 minutes till lunch. So, okay. So the first question we've got here is: can LEIs be issued for local governments with multiple enterprise funds? So I suppose the question there is how detailed can you go with the LEI in terms of getting down to that data?
Yeah, so I'm maybe not familiar enough with the question itself, but certainly the LEI can be issued to government entities and has been. Whether those are the U.S. government or whether they are a municipality or a sewer authority, so on and so forth. There's nothing that stops it being from issued to an obligor as well. But the wording on that question said what specifically at the end there, Campbell?
Enterprise funds.
And yes, I'm not familiar with enterprise funds, so I don't know if anybody else is. But
It's kind of at the fund level within a government body.
right. So if that fund is a legal entity, yes, it could be.
Okay, another question: is there a cost associated with getting either a CUSIP, a FIGI, or an LEI? And I'll leave that up to each of the participants to answer, because I'm sure local governments would be very interested in knowing.
So I'm sharing a microphone with my colleague Peter. I'm just going to follow up on the first question, just an unsolicited message as supporters and partners in the assignment of new LEIs. I just want to note, especially for this audience, that it has been a bit of a frustrating journey in that in the U.S. market, municipal requesters for CUSIP, we provide one-stop shopping where a CUSIP, an ISIN, and an LEI can all be obtained in one fell swoop. There's been tremendous reluctance by the U.S. municipal market under the premise that it's not mandated, so therefore an application for an LEI is viewed as extraneous. So just sharing that message, we're almost a decade into this journey since Lehman, and we'd like to see greater take-up. So pivoting to Campbell's second question, I can speak for CUSIP Global Services, as with many numbering agencies that conform to the ISO and the ISIN standard for cross-border communications. There is a cost recovery fee associated with the assignment of the local CUSIP. And then I would ask openly, beyond that, what does free really mean? And I know Rich did give some exposition around what data comes along with the symbol, but that's extremely important to do a deeper dive into that. So our database products combine a CUSIP identifier with up to 60 discrete data points, and it's that composition that makes the identifier valuable. Just putting out 3, 4, 5 other symbols or tickers, we don't find is tremendously valuable. And just wanted to be clear about that.
Okay. Did you want to answer that
Pete?
question, Richard? Or Pete?
Well, Pete, did you want to cover LEI, and then I can talk about Bloomberg's LEI?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Just
So
generally.
as part of the accreditation process, each of the 37 local operating units also makes transparent their cost recovery principles, right? So basically think of that as a mathematical equation that basically says this is the effort, both human, capital, machines that are involved in producing an LEI at an individual LEI basis, right? So back when the LEI system started, a LEI might have cost $220, but the cost has come down somewhat significantly. So for example, Bloomberg is now offering LEIs at $50, right? But again, the true answer is it's based on the cost recovery principles that they make transparent as part of the accreditation process.
And that differs per LOU. So you mentioned Bloomberg is $50 for the LEI application. There is a yearly renewal where, because the process of renewal is to recheck all the documentation and facts that entity still exists the way it says it exists and everything like that, so it remains as active. As for Figgy is free and open. I think Pete's list of attributes there was pretty spot on. Really, Bloomberg and Keiko, as soon as we know about it, a financial instrument of any kind, we assign a Figgy to the object. And that's how we manage it. Sometimes, and that's off of our own sourcing perspectives. So prospectuses, offering documents, all those kind of things that come in. So sometimes we do actually have it before people will apply for the CUSIP as well. As far as usefulness of the free and open data, as I said, everybody has access to the website. That data is what's available. You can type in that City of Columbus search, and if you find that stuff valuable, it gives you coupon ticker maturity and those kind of things. So some people find that useful for seeding your databases and actually linking things together, and also having a structured data model that's also free and open that you can use to aggregate and associate other information with through extending the metadata. Scott has a different opinion, but that's okay.
Okay, great. Well, it's 12:25. I'd just like to thank all that. We've got lots more questions. We're not going to have time. You can come up to them at lunch and you can ask them. So thank you very much to the panelists. This is a really, really important subject, and I really appreciate all the work that everyone has done. It's a really hard thing to do. So thank you very much. And people in the municipal market are probably going to become a lot more experienced with this over the coming years. So thank you very much to the panel.